Meet the family embarrassment, my brother told his groomsmen at his wedding. She works at a grocery store. They all laughed. I just smiled and walked away. Then the best man approached. Miss Anderson? I'm your head of security. Shall we leave? The morning of Marcus's wedding started like every other family gathering in the past 5 years with a phone call from my mother explaining why I needed to dress appropriately and try not to embarrass the family. I was standing in my hotel room at the Fairmont looking at the mustard yellow bridesmaid dress Patricia had specifically chosen for me when Mom called with her final instructions. Emma, sweetheart, I know this is hard for you. She said in that tone she'd perfected, part sympathy, part condescension, being around all of Marcus's successful friends, seeing Patricia's family with their achievements. Just remember that not everyone can be a doctor or lawyer. I'll keep that in mind. I replied, sipping up the dress that made me look like a diseased banana. And please don't mention your job situation unless someone asks directly. It's Marcus's day, and we don't want people feeling uncomfortable. My job situation, that's what the family called it. Now, not my career, not my work, my situation like it was a medical condition that required delicate handling. The truth was, I built Anderson Global Logistics into a $4.2 billion supply chain management company that employed over 85,000 people across 47 countries. We handled distribution for 30% of the Fortune 500, had revolutionized cold chain logistics for pharmaceutical companies, and were 3 days away from closing the largest merger in our industry's history. But to my family, I worked at a grocery store. It had started innocuously enough 7 years ago. When I was building my first distribution center, I'd worked nights at a safe way to understand every aspect of food retail from the ground up. I wanted to know how products moved from suppliers to shelves, how inventory management worked at the store level, how customer demand patterns shifted. Most executives learn this stuff from spreadsheets and consultants. I learned it by scanning barcodes and stocking shelves from midnight to 6 a.m. When family asked about work during those early years, I'd say I was in food retail or working in supply chain logistics. Somehow this got translated into Emma works at a grocery store, and once that narrative took hold, it was impossible to correct without seeming like I was lying or delusional. The first time I tried to explain what Anderson Global actually did, Uncle Richard had patted my shoulder and said, "That's great, honey. It's good that you're ambitious about your grocery store job." When I mentioned hiring my first 100 employees, Aunt Susan had nodded supportively and said, "Oh, are you managing a department now? That's wonderful progress." Eventually, I stopped trying to correct them. It was easier to let them think what they wanted them to deal with their skepticism, and honestly, part of me was curious to see how long they could maintain their delusions about my life. The answer, apparently, was indefinitely. The rehearsal dinner the night before had been particularly brutal. Patricia's family were genuine achievers. Her father had built a successful construction company. Her brother had just sold his tech startup for $50 million. Her mother was a federal judge. They were warm, accomplished people who clearly expected Marcus's family to be equally impressive. So Emma, Patricia's brother Jason, had asked during cocktails, "Marcus mentioned you work in food service. Are you planning to open your own restaurant?" Before I could answer, Marcus jumped in. "Oh no, Emma's not the entrepreneur type. She works at a grocery store. It's honest work, though." The slight pause in conversation was painful. Jason recovered quickly. He was too polite to show his surprise, but I saw Patricia's parents exchange a glance. They were clearly wondering how a family that included doctors, lawyers, and successful business owners had produced someone whose biggest achievement was apparently avoiding unemployment. Food retail is fascinating. I'd said simply, the logistics alone are incredibly complex. I'm sure Patricia's father had replied kindly, then immediately changed the subject to Marcus's law practice. Later that evening, I'd overheard Patricia's mother talking to my mother by the hotel bar. Patricia mentioned Emma might be a godmother to their children someday. She'd said, carefully, "Oh, Emma would love that." Mom had replied, "She's wonderful with kids. Of course, she's not in a position to be much of a financial influence, but she's very loving financial influence. Well, she's still finding her way professionally. We help her out when we can. Family takes care of family, but your grandchildren will have plenty of successful role models without needing to worry about Emma's situation." I'd left the bar after that and spent the rest of the evening in my room reviewing acquisition reports and trying to remember why I thought attending this wedding was a good idea. The morning of the ceremony brought fresh humiliations during hair and makeup. The other bridesmaids, Patricia's sister, and 2 college friends, were discussing their careers. One was a pediatric surgeon. Another was launching her second startup. The third was a partner at a consulting firm, and Emma works in grocery. Patricia had explained when they asked about me, "She's been doing that for years now." "Oh," the surgeon had said, politely, "that must be stable." "Work very stable," I'd agreed, not mentioning that Anderson Global's stability came from having exclusive contracts with every major food retailer in North America. The conversation had moved on to their vacation plans. Someone's family had a house in the Hamptons. Another was planning a month in Europe. When they'd asked about my travel plans, I'd simply said I didn't have any scheduled, rather than explain that I'd be in Singapore next week, finalizing a $1.8 billion merger, followed by board meetings in London and a factory opening in Bavaria. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful. Patricia looked radiant in her grandmother's lace dress, and Marcus seemed genuinely happy. I stood at the altar holding the bridal bouquet, trying to focus on their joy instead of the whispered comments from various relatives about my appearance. Poor Emma, I heard Aunt Susan tell someone behind me that color is so unflattering on her. Patricia should have chosen something more appropriate for her complexion. The dress isn't the problem, someone else had whispered back. It's the stress, financial pressure ages you. I'd maintain my smile throughout the ceremony, even when the photographer had positioned me slightly behind the other bridesmaids for the formal photos for composition. He'd explained, though everyone understood, it was to minimize the visual impact of the family member who didn't quite fit.